While bombs fell and battleships clashed during World War II, another life-or-death struggle unfolded in backyards across the globe. As food rationing tightened its grip, 30 remarkable vegetables emerged as silent heroes, feeding millions when conventional food supplies collapsed. These weren't just plants, they were wartime weapons that helped win victory from the home front. Let's discover these forgotten vegetables that saved nations during humanity's darkest hour. Victory cabbage, American sauerkraut. When World War II erupted, anti-German sentiment swept America, and a humble vegetable underwent a patriotic transformation. Sauerkraut, with its distinctly German name, suddenly became victory cabbage in markets and government publications across the nation. This remarkable fermented food offered something precious during wartime: preservation without refrigeration or canning supplies, both of which were severely rationed. Families could transform abundant cabbage harvests into tangy, vitamin-rich preserved food, using nothing but salt and thyme. What made victory cabbage particularly valuable was its exceptional vitamin C content, which helped prevent scurvy when citrus fruits were unavailable due to shipping restrictions. The simple fermentation process also enhanced the bioavailability of nutrients, providing critical nutrition when diets were otherwise limited. Wartime governments actively promoted victory cabbage not just as a patriotic duty, but as a practical solution to vegetable preservation when metal for canning was diverted to munitions. A single large crock of this fermented cabbage could feed a family for months, freeing commercial food supplies for troops overseas. Swedes, rutabagas. During the darkest days of wartime food rationing, a root vegetable with an unfortunate name became Britain's unexpected savior, the rutabaga, or swede as the British called it. This humble root, often overlooked in peacetime, emerged as an essential survival tool for a nation under siege. Unlike more delicate vegetables, swedes thrived in poor soil, matured quickly, and stored perfectly without refrigeration for months in simple root cellars or even buried in garden soil. Their high vitamin C content, more than oranges by weight, helped prevent widespread scurvy during the crucial winter months when shipping blockades prevented citrus imports. What made Swedes particularly valuable was their incredible versatility in the kitchen. Wartime cookbooks featured hundreds of creative rutabaga recipes, from mock apple pies, where grated Swedes replaced scarce apples, to rutabaga custards that mimicked more luxurious desserts. Perhaps most importantly, Swedes could be successfully grown in areas suffering from bomb damage, producing reliable harvests, even in disrupted soil. This resilience made them vital to urban food security during the relentless bombing campaigns of the Blitz. Jerusalem artichokes. As wartime shipping restrictions limited food imports, Americans rediscovered a native plant that had sustained indigenous peoples for centuries, the Jerusalem artichoke. Despite its misleading name, it's neither from Jerusalem nor an artichoke. This remarkable native sunflower relative became a wartime sensation for its incredible productivity. What made Jerusalem artichokes particularly valuable during wartime was their perennial nature. Once planted, they returned year after year without any effort. Their knobby tubers could be harvested as needed throughout winter, with those left in the ground simply sprouting into the next year's crop. Government pamphlets praised their exceptional nutritional value, particularly their high iron content, which helped compensate for reduced meat rations. Their natural sweetness, from inulin rather than starch, made them valuable for adding flavor to dishes when sugar was strictly rationed. Most importantly, Jerusalem artichokes thrived with absolutely no attention, producing up to 15 pounds of food per square yard in their second year. For families juggling war work, air raid duties, and home defense responsibilities, this self-sufficient food source freed precious time while ensuring food security. Kale, the frost-defying green. While delicate lettuce and spinach withered at the first frost, wartime families relied on a far hardier leafy green, kale. This remarkable vegetable not only survived winter temperatures as low as 10 degrees Fahrenheit, but actually improved in flavor after frost, providing fresh vitamins when most gardens lay dormant. Unlike most greens that required spring planting, kale could be planted in late summer and harvested throughout winter, extending the productive growing season by months. This scheduling advantage allowed families to produce fresh vegetables when seeds and garden supplies were most limited. What made kale particularly valuable was its exceptional calcium content. Cup for cup, it provided more calcium than milk, which was severely rationed. Wartime nutritionists promoted kale as essential for children's bone development when dairy products were scarce. The plant's incredible resilience to pests, disease, and poor soil meant success even for novice victory gardeners with limited growing experience. During a time when every harvest failure represented a genuine threat to family nutrition, kale's reliability made it worth its weight in gold on the home front. Parsnips, as sugar rationing tightened its grip, often limited to just 8 ounces per person per week, wartime gardeners rediscovered an ancient vegetable with a remarkable secret: parsnips. These unassuming root vegetables contained nature's own sweetness that intensified dramatically after exposure to frost. Unlike quick-growing crops, parsnips required patience, taking nearly 4 months to mature. But wartime gardeners discovered this long growth period was actually an advantage. The roots could be left in the ground all winter, protected from freezing by the soil itself, and harvested as needed. This storage without storage quality freed precious pantry space for other essentials. What made parsnips particularly valuable was their transformation after frost. The cold converted the root starches to sugars, creating a naturally sweet vegetable that could be used in both savory dishes and desserts. Wartime recipe books featured parsnip cakes and parsnip puddings that helped families create special occasion treats without depleting precious sugar rations. The high energy content, more calories per pound than potatoes, made them especially important during periods of heavy physical labor on farms and in factories supporting the war effort. This combination of natural sweetness and high energy made parsnips an essential part of wartime food security. Good King Henry. As wartime seed shortages limited garden options, European families rediscovered an ancient perennial green that had sustained their medieval ancestors. Good King Henry. This remarkable plant, once a staple of monastery gardens, emerged from obscurity to feed families when conventional vegetables were scarce. Unlike annual spinach that required precious seeds each year, Good King Henry returned on its own each spring, producing tender shoots that could be harvested like asparagus, followed by spinach-like leaves all summer long. This dual harvest nature effectively doubled its food value from the same garden space. What made this forgotten vegetable particularly valuable was its exceptional hardiness. It thrived in partial shade, poor soil, and neglected areas where other vegetables failed. For families whose primary gardeners had been drafted into military service, this self-sufficient perennial provided critical nutrition with minimal care. The plant's rich iron content made it particularly important for women working in munitions factories, where iron deficiency anemia was a constant concern affecting both health and production efficiency. Government nutrition programs specifically recommended Good King Henry as a blood-building food that could help maintain the strength of the industrial workforce. Cardoon, the artillery plant. When Italian and Mediterranean immigrant communities faced wartime food shortages, they introduced their neighbors to a remarkable traditional vegetable, cardoon. Related to the artichoke but grown for its thick celery-like stalks, this impressive plant became known as the artillery plant for its towering height that could reach 7 feet, providing a visual barrier for victory gardens. Unlike most vegetables that were harvested once, cardoon's blanched stalks could be continuously harvested throughout the growing season, providing an extended yield from the same garden space. The mild artichoke flavor added interest to monotonous wartime diets when spices and imported flavorings were unavailable. What made cardoon particularly valuable was its perennial nature in milder climates, returning year after year with minimal care. In colder regions, the roots could be protected with mulch over winter, creating a reliable food source that didn't require annual replanting or precious seeds. For communities facing both food and fuel rationing, cardoon offered another advantage. Its dried stalks and tremendous seed heads could be used as kindling and fire starters when heating fuel was scarce. This dual-purpose role, providing both food and fuel, made it especially valuable to resource-conscious wartime households. Salsify, the oyster plant. As wartime fish and seafood supplies dwindled under rationing and maritime dangers, families discovered a remarkable root vegetable that offered a surprising flavor alternative. Salsify, often called the oyster plant for its distinctive taste reminiscent of oysters when cooked. This forgotten root vegetable helped diversify monotonous wartime diets. Unlike many vegetables that required immediate harvest, salsify had an extraordinary storage ability. It could remain perfect in the ground all winter, creating a natural root cellar that required no preservation equipment. Families could simply dig roots as needed, even breaking through frozen ground to access fresh food in midwinter. What made salsify particularly valuable was that both its roots and greens were edible, effectively providing two vegetables from the same plant. The spring greens appeared weeks before other vegetables were ready, providing vital early-season nutrition when winter stores were depleted. The long, straight roots were also remarkably efficient with garden space, growing vertically rather than spreading. This space efficiency became crucial as victory gardens expanded into ever smaller available spaces, including narrow strips between buildings in bomb-damaged urban areas. Scorzonera, the black salsify. While regular salsify proved valuable, wartime European gardeners relied even more heavily on its remarkable cousin, Scorzonera, or black salsify. This unusual root vegetable with long black skin and snow-white flesh offered exceptional winter survival capabilities that made it irreplaceable during the conflict's harshest years. Unlike most root crops that had to be harvested before hard freezes, Scorzonera could remain perfectly preserved in the ground for 2 full years, creating a food reserve that spanned multiple growing seasons. This long-term security became especially valuable during extended bombing campaigns when gardening became dangerous or impossible. What made Scorzonera particularly important was its exceptional content of inulin, a complex carbohydrate that didn't raise blood sugar. For families with diabetic members facing insulin shortages due to wartime medical rationing, this vegetable provided safe sustenance that helped manage the condition when medications were unavailable. The plant was also remarkably resistant to pests and disease, thriving in the same garden space for years without the crop rotation normally required for root vegetables. This dependability made it a cornerstone of wartime food security planning, ensuring harvests even when garden knowledge and supplies were limited. Hamburg parsley. As garden space became precious during wartime, vegetables that offered multiple harvests gained special importance. Hamburg parsley emerged as a standout example, a dual-purpose plant producing both parsley leaves and thick, parsnip-like roots from the same footprint. Unlike conventional parsley, grown only for its leaves, Hamburg parsley developed substantial roots that stored perfectly in the ground or in sand-filled boxes throughout winter. This 2 crops in one efficiency effectively doubled the food value from the same garden space, crucial when victory gardens expanded into ever smaller yards and public spaces. What made Hamburg parsley particularly valuable was its exceptional vitamin content. The leaves provided more vitamin C than oranges, crucial when citrus was unavailable, while the roots offered concentrated nutrition that helped supplement meager protein rations. The plant's biennial nature also provided an advantage during seed shortages. Families could harvest leaves and some roots in the first year, then allow remaining plants to flower and produce seeds in the second year, creating self-sufficiency in a time when garden seeds were often difficult to obtain. If you're finding this exploration of wartime vegetables valuable, consider supporting us on Patreon. Your membership helps us research and preserve more of this vanishing knowledge while bringing these forgotten crops back to modern gardens. The link to join is in the description below. Every member receives our exclusive Victory Garden Seed Saving Guide featuring these wartime varieties, Mashua. As global conflict disrupted traditional food supplies, agricultural experts sought hardy alternatives from around the world. From the high Andes came an extraordinary tuber crop unknown to most Americans and Europeans, Mashua. Related to nasturtiums, this remarkable plant produced abundant, pest-resistant tubers that quickly gained importance in wartime Britain. Unlike potatoes that succumbed to blight and required substantial growing space, Mashua vines could be trained up supports, producing up to 4 pounds of nutritious tubers per square foot, among the highest yields of any vegetable. The attractive vines with distinctive leaves and bright flowers serve the dual purpose of camouflaging Victory Gardens from aerial observation. What made Mashua particularly valuable was its extraordinary pest resistance. The plants naturally repelled root-eating insects and nematodes, protecting not just themselves but neighboring crops as well. This protective quality earned it special placement in Victory Garden designs, creating natural pest barriers without requiring precious chemical pesticides. The peppery-tasting tubers could be cooked like potatoes or pickled for winter storage, providing variety to limited wartime diets. Their high protein content, up to 16% when dried, made them particularly valuable as meat substitutes when animal products were strictly rationed throughout the conflict. Skirret. As sugar rationing limited sweeteners to merely ounces per week, wartime gardeners rediscovered an ancient root vegetable that had once been more popular than carrots, skirret. This forgotten perennial produced clusters of sweet white roots that provided natural sweetness when other options disappeared. Unlike most vegetables that required annual replanting, skirret formed perennial clumps that returned stronger each year, producing more roots with each season. This self-perpetuating nature made it particularly valuable when seeds and garden supplies were limited by wartime restrictions. What made skirret especially important was its remarkable winter hardiness. The roots could remain in the ground throughout winter, available for harvest even in freezing conditions when other fresh foods were unavailable. This living root cellar quality required no preservation equipment or techniques. The plant's natural sweetness came from complex carbohydrates rather than simple sugars, providing sustained energy crucial for long hours of physical labor in factories and fields supporting the war effort. Government nutritionists recommended skirret particularly for children, as its sweet taste made otherwise plain foods more appealing when treats were unavailable. Ochre. The New Zealand yam. When potato blight threatened British and European crops during wartime, agricultural authorities introduced an extraordinary Andean tuber previously successful in New Zealand, OCA. These colourful, tangy tubers quickly became Victory Garden favourites for their exceptional storage quality and resistance to the diseases affecting potatoes. Unlike conventional root crops that required immediate harvest, OCA tubers actually improved after digging, developing sweeter flavour after exposure to sunlight for several days. This unique curing process eliminated the need for immediate processing during the busy autumn harvest season when labour was scarce. What made OCA particularly valuable was its extraordinary productivity in cool, wet conditions, precisely the growing environment where many other vegetables struggled. The plants thrived in the damp British climate, producing abundant harvests even during the challenging growing seasons of the war years. The tuber's high vitamin C content, far superior to potatoes, helped prevent nutritional deficiencies when citrus and other imports were unavailable. Their crisp texture when raw also provided a refreshing salad ingredient during winter months when fresh vegetables were scarce, adding crucial variety to limited wartime diets. Purple sprouting broccoli. When garden production typically fell dormant, wartime British families relied on an extraordinary vegetable that defied winter itself, purple sprouting broccoli. Unlike modern broccoli with its single large head, this traditional variety survived winter temperatures as low as 10 degrees Fahrenheit, then produced dozens of small, tender purple shoots in late winter when other food was scarcest. The remarkable timing of its harvest, February through April, filled the crucial hunger gap when stored foods were depleted, but spring planting had not yet yielded results. This productive window made it an essential component of year-round food security during the challenging war years. What made purple sprouting broccoli particularly valuable was its incredible vitamin content, providing more vitamin C than oranges at a time when scurvy threatened urban populations due to citrus shortages. Government nutritional programs specifically promoted this vegetable for its role in maintaining public health during blockades. The plant's exceptional hardiness meant success even for novice gardeners with limited experience, providing reliable harvests when garden failures could have severe consequences for family nutrition. Its ability to withstand neglect made it particularly important as women undertook factory work and had less time for garden maintenance. Orach, the mountain spinach. When soil was damaged by bombings or spinach seeds became scarce, wartime gardeners turned to an ancient, nearly forgotten leafy green, orach or mountain spinach. This remarkable hardy annual produced abundant leaves even in damaged soils, thriving in conditions where more delicate vegetables failed. Unlike true spinach that bolted quickly in summer heat, orach continued producing tender leaves throughout the hottest months, extending the harvest season by months. The striking red and purple varieties also served the dual purpose of adding beauty to victory gardens while providing essential nutrition. What made orach particularly valuable was its exceptional salt tolerance, allowing it to thrive in coastal areas damaged by flooding or in soil with high mineral content where other leafy greens would fail. This adaptability made it crucial for maintaining green vegetable production in compromised growing environments. The plant's self-seeding nature meant that a single planting could return year after year without requiring precious seed supplies. During periods when commercial seeds were strictly rationed or unavailable, this self-sufficiency ensured continued production of vital leafy greens even when new supplies couldn't be obtained. Keltus. As lettuce supplies dwindled during wartime transport restrictions, Chinese immigrant communities introduced Western neighbors to a remarkable alternative, celtus or stem lettuce. Unlike conventional lettuce grown for its leaves, celtus produced a thick, crisp stem that stored far better and provided substantially more nutrition. The unique dual-harvest nature of this vegetable proved particularly valuable. Young leaves could be harvested continuously as a salad green, followed by the main stem harvest weeks later. This extended production effectively doubled the food value from the same garden space. What made keltus particularly important was its exceptional vitamin E content, rare in wartime diets, which helped maintain skin health and wound healing during a time when medical supplies were limited. The stems also contained significant amounts of potassium, helping to balance nutritional deficiencies in ration-restricted diets. Unlike head lettuce that required precise growing conditions, celtus thrived in varied environments and even partial shade, making it ideal for victory gardens in less than optimal urban spaces. The stems remained crisp for weeks in cool storage when refrigeration was unavailable, providing fresh vegetables long after harvest. Yacon. When sweet treats disappeared under sugar rationing, South American immigrant communities shared a remarkable root crop with their neighbors, yacon. Unlike most root vegetables that stored energy as starch, yacon tubers contained fructooligosaccharides, complex sugars that tasted sweet but didn't impact blood sugar levels. The tremendous productivity of these plants made them particularly valuable. A single root system could produce up to 40 pounds of crisp, juicy tubers. This exceptional yield provided sweet refreshment when fruits and conventional treats were unavailable due to shipping restrictions and rationing. What made yacon especially important was its storage capability. The tubers actually became sweeter after several weeks in storage, developing an apple-like flavor that children particularly enjoyed. This provided crucial psychological comfort during stressful wartime conditions when familiar treats had disappeared. The perennial nature of the plants in milder climates meant that small root pieces left in the ground would regenerate the following year, creating food security that spanned multiple growing seasons. This self-perpetuating quality reduced dependence on commercial seed supplies when agricultural systems were strained by wartime demands. Winter purslane, miner's lettuce. When scurvy threatened urban populations due to fruit and vegetable shortages, a humble native plant from Western North America emerged as an unexpected lifesaver, winter purslane, or miner's lettuce. This remarkable wild green contained more vitamin C than oranges, growing vigorously during winter months when other fresh greens were unavailable. Unlike conventional garden vegetables that required formal planting and care, winter purslane would self-seed abundantly, returning year after year with no effort. It thrived in disturbed soil, including areas damaged by bombing, often being the first edible plant to reclaim these spaces. What made winter purslane particularly valuable was its ability to grow in deep shade and even indoors near windows, providing fresh greens in bomb shelters and basement areas where conventional gardening was impossible. This adaptability made it especially important in heavily bombed urban areas where outdoor activities were dangerous. The plant's high oxalic acid content gave it a distinctive tangy flavor that added interest to otherwise bland wartime diets when spices and flavorings were scarce. Government nutrition programs actively promoted its identification and consumption, with pamphlets teaching city dwellers to recognize this valuable wild food growing in parks and vacant lots. Chinese artichoke, krosny. As global conflict disrupted normal food supplies, Chinese and Japanese immigrant communities introduced Western neighbors to an extraordinary perennial root crop, Chinese artichokes or krosnies. These small, pearl-like tubers with their distinctive shape required no peeling and could be eaten raw or cooked, providing crisp texture when fresh vegetables were scarce. Unlike potatoes and other staple crops that were vulnerable to late blight, Chinese artichokes showed remarkable resistance to disease and pests, providing reliable harvests even for inexperienced victory gardeners. Their perennial nature meant that small tubers left in the ground would regrow the following year, creating self-perpetuating food security. What made these unusual tubers particularly valuable was their exceptional storage capability. They remained crisp and fresh in moist sand for months without refrigeration. This extended availability of fresh vegetables deep into winter when other options had been exhausted. The plants were also remarkably space-efficient, producing abundant harvests in borders, partial shade, and other marginal garden areas where conventional vegetables wouldn't thrive. This adaptability allowed families to maximize food production from limited garden space during critical wartime shortages. Sculpit, stridolo. When fresh vegetables became scarce, Italian immigrant communities shared a traditional plant that blurred the line between herb and vegetable, sculpit or stridolo. This forgotten Mediterranean herb produced abundant edible leaves with a complex flavor combining notes of arugula, tarragon, and chicory, adding interest to otherwise monotonous wartime diets. Unlike most leafy greens that demanded rich soil and regular water, sculpit thrived in poor, dry conditions where other vegetables failed, even growing in rubble-filled areas damaged by bombing. This extraordinary resilience made it particularly valuable in war-damaged urban environments. What made sculpit especially important was its cut-and-come-again growth habit. Harvesting the tender shoots actually stimulated more production, with plants continuing to yield fresh greens from spring until late autumn. This extended harvest provided crucial fresh nutrition over a much longer season than conventional vegetables. The plants also flowered abundantly, supporting bees and pollinators that were essential for victory garden productivity during a time when managed honeybee colonies had declined due to wartime resource limitations. This support of the broader garden ecosystem made sculpit particularly valuable in integrated wartime food production. Perennial arugula. While annual arugula required constant replanting, wartime Italian gardeners introduced their neighbors to a remarkable perennial alternative. wall rocket or perennial arugula. This tough, drought-resistant relative of common arugula would return year after year, providing spicy leaves that added flavor to bland wartime diets. Unlike conventional salad greens that succumbed quickly to summer heat, perennial arugula thrived through the hottest months, continuing to produce tender new leaves when picked regularly. This extended harvest season provided fresh greens when most lettuce had long since bolted and turned bitter. What made this forgotten vegetable particularly valuable was its ability to grow in unlikely places, cracks in walls, between paving stones, and in rubble-filled lots where conventional gardening was impossible. This adaptability allowed food production to continue even in heavily damaged urban areas. The plant's deep taproot made it exceptionally drought-resistant, continuing to produce without watering even during dry summer months when water restrictions were in effect. This self-sufficiency freed precious resources while ensuring continuous production of vitamin-rich greens throughout the growing season. Agretti salsola soda. When coastal communities faced food shortages due to naval blockades, Italian immigrants introduced their neighbors to a remarkable vegetable that thrived in difficult conditions, agretti, or land seaweed. This unusual plant with succulent, crisp stems provided the mineral-rich flavor of seafood without requiring dangerous fishing expeditions in mine-filled waters. Unlike conventional vegetables that demanded fresh water, agretti's salt tolerance allowed it to be irrigated with slightly brackish water in coastal areas, conserving precious fresh water supplies for other needs. The plants thrived in sandy coastal soils where few other vegetables would grow. What made agretti particularly valuable was its content of iodine and other minerals typically obtained from seafood, helping prevent thyroid problems and other deficiency diseases when fishing was restricted by naval warfare. Government health authorities particularly recommended it for pregnant women and growing children. The plant's unusual harvest window, late spring through early summer, filled a crucial gap when winter stores were depleted, but main summer crops weren't yet ready. This timing made it an essential component of year-round food security during the uncertain war years when consistent supply couldn't be guaranteed. Swiss chard. When garden space and seeds were strictly limited, wartime victory gardeners relied heavily on a vegetable with extraordinary productivity, Swiss chard. Unlike most greens that required replanting throughout the season, a single planting of chard would continue producing from spring until winter frost if outer leaves were harvested regularly. This remarkable cut-and-come-again capability effectively turned a small plot into a continuous vegetable factory, with some wartime records showing yields of over 40 pounds of nutritious greens from just a 10-foot row. At a time when every seed and inch of garden space was precious, this efficiency made chard worth its weight in gold. What made Swiss chard especially valuable was its exceptional nutrient density, particularly iron, vital for maintaining the health of women working in factories when meat was strictly rationed. Government nutrition programs specifically promoted chard as a blood-building food essential for the industrial workforce. The plant's remarkable heat tolerance meant continued production through summer when lettuce and spinach had long since failed. This reliability ensured continuous fresh food even during the challenging midsummer period when many victory gardens showed reduced productivity. Turnip-rooted chervil. During the darkest days of wartime food shortages, French resistance fighters and rural communities relied on a forgotten woodland root that could be grown in forest shade, turnip-rooted chervil. This remarkable vegetable thrived in partial shade where conventional garden crops would fail, allowing food production to be concealed from occupying forces. Unlike most root vegetables that required full sun and open garden space, turnip-rooted chervil produced sweet aromatic roots with an anise parsley flavor in woodland settings, effectively turning non-agricultural land into productive food sources. This adaptability proved particularly valuable when conventional gardens were vulnerable to confiscation. What made this forgotten root especially important was its unusual growth cycle. Planted in autumn and harvested in spring, it effectively utilized the off-season when garden space was otherwise unproductive. This counter-seasonal production helped extend limited food supplies across the entire year. The plant's inconspicuous appearance, resembling natural woodland vegetation, made it particularly valuable for resistance communities needing to conceal food production from authorities. This stealth quality allowed covert cultivation that supplemented meager rations while avoiding detection during a time when food production was tightly controlled. Caucasian mountain spinach. As seed supplies dwindled under wartime restrictions, European gardeners turned increasingly to perennial vegetables that didn't require annual replanting, particularly Caucasian mountain spinach. This remarkable plant produced abundant spinach-like leaves from the same roots for up to 25 years, creating food security that spanned the entire conflict and beyond. Unlike conventional greens that produced for merely weeks, mountain spinach yielded fresh leaves continuously from early spring through late autumn. The young shoots could be harvested like asparagus, while mature leaves were used like spinach, effectively providing two distinct vegetables from the same plant. What made this forgotten perennial particularly valuable was its exceptional cold hardiness, surviving winter temperatures as low as -40 degrees Fahrenheit without protection. This reliability ensured continued production even through the extraordinarily harsh European winters of the war years. The plant's deep root system made it remarkably drought-resistant, continuing to produce without watering even during water restrictions. This self-sufficiency freed precious resources while ensuring continuous production of vitamin-rich greens that helped prevent nutritional deficiencies when diverse foods were unavailable. Spanish black radish. While small red radishes provided quick harvests, wartime European families relied on a far more substantial root crop for winter nutrition: Spanish black radishes. These large black-skinned roots, often weighing a pound or more each, stored perfectly for months without refrigeration, providing fresh food long after harvest. Unlike conventional radishes eaten primarily fresh, Spanish black radishes had exceptional versatility. They could be eaten raw, cooked like turnips, or dried and ground as a coffee substitute when imports were unavailable. This adaptability made them particularly valuable as cooking ingredients had to be continually reinvented under shifting ration restrictions. What made these forgotten radishes especially important was their powerful medicinal qualities, particularly for respiratory and digestive conditions. When conventional medicines were scarce, thinly sliced radish with honey became a standard treatment for coughs and bronchial infections across occupied Europe. The plants showed remarkable cold tolerance, continuing to grow well into early winter in most regions, effectively extending the productive garden season by months. This late-season growth provided fresh food during critical periods when other garden productivity had declined and winter stores were not yet established. Garden sorrel. When vitamin C deficiency threatened wartime populations, a forgotten perennial leaf vegetable emerged as an unexpected lifesaver: garden sorrel. This remarkably resilient plant contained more vitamin C than oranges, producing tangy leaves from the same roots for up to 20 years without replanting. Unlike most greens that were available only briefly, sorrel provided fresh leaves from early spring through late autumn, with production particularly abundant during early spring when other vegetables were just being planted. This early harvest helped bridge the crucial hunger gap when winter stores were depleted but new crops weren't yet ready. What made sorrel particularly valuable was its exceptional shade tolerance, growing successfully under fruit trees or in north-facing spaces where most vegetables would fail. This adaptability effectively doubled the productive capacity of limited garden space by utilizing areas unsuitable for sun-loving crops. The distinctive lemon-like tanginess added interest to wartime diets when citrus fruits were unavailable, providing psychological comfort through flavor diversity during monotonous rationing. French resistance cookbooks featured numerous sorrel recipes that helped maintain cultural food traditions during occupation while providing crucial nutrition from this easily grown perennial. Chicory, the coffee alternative. As coffee imports vanished under naval blockades, a humble root vegetable gained unexpected importance across Europe. Chicory. While its bitter leaves had long been used as salad greens, wartime necessity transformed its roasted roots into the continent's primary coffee substitute. Unlike many crops that demanded good soil, chicory thrived in poor conditions, even growing in rubble-filled bomb sites and along roadsides. This adaptability allowed production to continue in damaged urban environments where conventional agriculture was impossible. What made chicory particularly valuable was its dual-purpose nature. Its leaves provided nutritious salad greens throughout summer, while its roots were harvested in autumn for coffee substitute production. This two-crop efficiency maximized food value from limited growing space. The coffee substitute produced from roasted chicory roots provided more than just flavor. It created an important psychological connection to pre-war normality during deeply abnormal times. The morning ritual of a hot cup, even if not true coffee, maintained a crucial sense of civilization and routine that supported morale throughout the conflict. Finnish swamp turnip. In northern European regions with short growing seasons, an extraordinary root vegetable helped prevent widespread starvation, the Finnish swamp turnip, or lanttu. These massive roots, often weighing 15 pounds or more, thrived in wet, acidic soil where conventional crops would fail. Unlike most vegetables that demanded careful cultivation, swamp turnips grew with minimal attention, succeeding even in partially waterlogged conditions too wet for normal agriculture. This adaptability effectively transformed useless boggy areas into productive food landscapes during critical shortages. What made these forgotten turnips particularly valuable was their incredible storage life. They remained perfect for up to 8 months in simple root cellars or even buried in soil, providing reliable nutrition throughout the long northern winters when fresh food was unavailable. Their high vitamin C content, maintained even during extended storage, helped prevent scurvy in northern populations cut off from citrus imports. Norwegian resistance records indicate that these humble roots, often hidden in remote bog areas inaccessible to occupying forces, saved thousands from starvation during the harshest winters of occupation. Victory cabbage. When other vegetables succumbed to the challenges of wartime, a special variety of non-heading cabbage emerged as the ultimate survivor, victory cabbage. Unlike conventional cabbage grown for single heads, this remarkable walking stick kale variety produced nutritious leaves continuously for up to 2 years from the same plants. The extraordinary resilience of these plants earned them the nickname bulletproof greens in British victory gardens. They survived partial damage, drought, cold, and even some shrapnel while continuing to produce. This unmatched hardiness ensured food production continued even in areas experiencing active bombing. What made victory cabbage particularly valuable was its vertical growth habit, reaching heights of 6 feet or more. This upward growth effectively tripled harvest volume from the same ground footprint, maximizing production from limited garden space when food security depended on every available inch. Perhaps most importantly, these remarkable plants served as visual symbols of resistance and resilience. Their towering stalks, visible above garden fences, reminded communities that life continued even amidst destruction. As they withstood bomb blasts and harsh winters while continuing to feed families, victory cabbage became both practical sustenance and powerful metaphor for the unbreakable human spirit during history's darkest hour. These 30 vegetables aren't just plants, they're survival tools that help nations endure humanity's largest conflict. Each one was selected and cultivated for its ability to provide reliable nutrition when conventional food systems collapsed. Today, many of these varieties still exist, preserved by dedicated seed savers who understand their timeless value beyond the historical context. If you found this journey through wartime vegetable gardening valuable, hit that like button and subscribe for more forgotten wisdom from the past. Which of these vegetables surprised you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, when we'll uncover more survival lessons from our ancestors.